As the old saying goes, there are two certainties in life. Number one, death. And number two, taxes. We can't help you with death, but we've got you covered with taxes. This is Ask the Tax Attorney. As you know, the federal government doesn't play when it comes to owning taxes, but too many people freak out about it. So if you're a business owner and you're in trouble, or you're afraid you might be in trouble with the IRS, this is the show for you. Your host is a tax attorney with over 20 years of experience, and she's helped clients erase over $4 million in tax debt. So let's get to it. This is the Ask the Tax Attorney podcast. And now your host, Claudia Moncars.
Welcome to all our listeners. And I also want to say thank you and welcome to Byron Longworth from Terrace Law Group. Thank you for joining us. First of all, would you like to give us a little brief history of your journey, your business journey? Because like I always say, we may be lawyers, but we're also business owners. So not a lot of people get to know our other side.
Thanks, Claudia. It actually, if we go far enough back, I grew up where my mom was actually an Lsat Prep teacher who taught people to pass the law school admission test.
Oh,
she owned a small company doing this called Blackstone, and it was like the official course of University of Central Florida and the official course of Stetson University. And I had no interest in going to law school after graduating from USF. It was not anywhere on my radar at all, but it was during probably one of the worst recessions in American history. I think it was around 2011. It began coming in 2012. I really needed a job, and she just hired me to do marketing stuff. So I worked with her doing that. I just ended up watching so many people going through Lsat Prep that I eventually figured I should just try it out. That's actually how I kind of got the idea to go to law school. It wasn't anything that prompted me initially. And then, even when in law school, I didn't even know what I wanted to do exactly until after I started getting into some of the courses where I tried a lot of different stuff and realized I really liked litigating. But somewhere along the lines in the middle of law school, I kind of identified that getting the name of a law firm that was a city name could be really cool if I could find one where that was possible. And I mean, all around me, the Tampa Law Group existed, the Valrico Law Group existed, the Brandon Law Group existed. Temple Terrace was one where, it's a small city that's right next to Tampa where, it didn't have any law firm named after it. In fact, there's not really that many lawyers in this vicinity. It's only 6 square miles. So I had that seed planted for a while of that.
that is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, the journey started mostly, even after, of course, I graduated in August. So I had to wait all the way until, February to pass the bar, to take the bar exam. And I got through it luckily, but the irony was I didn't even think I was going to pass it. It was kind of pretty neat that I got through my first try, but I wasn't counting on that. So I just started applying for jobs, and I became, an employed lawyer for a period of time. It was interesting because, my whole time for the years prior, because I'd worked for about 3 to 4 years before I went to law school. I was at the top of the totem pole, then going in as a employed lawyer, the new associate at a small firm. Like I was all the way at the bottom. Like not only was I below the other attorney, but I was like below the paralegals at the very bottom. And it was like none of them trusted me, and they were all like, and it just was such a culture shock.
But did that help you now as a business owner?
What helped probably was mostly I did get a lot of business ideas from it, but part of it was I realized through being employed like an associate attorney for approximately a year that I thought a lot about how much fun it would be to have my own practice, that it would and I never thought about going into the field this soon, like opening up that soon. So I opened opened up about a year after practicing. But what actually prompted me is I saw the location that it was right across the street from my mom's Lsat Prep company branch in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
It was like just directly across the street. I thought how cool it would be because it was just such a good deal for the space that's partially what prompted me. I know that's not a very good reason where most attorneys would ever consider that, but to me, I just kind of
No, I think it's great because I think in law school they teach us how to always be right, and I think that mindset is wrong when you're a business owner. You have to be willing to take risks, which they ingrain in that is so bad for as a lawyer. Don't take a risk if you don't know the answer, which goes against being a business owner. So you're probably ahead of everybody.
Yeah, well, I basically just got a really good deal in the space, and I reached out to because I really wanted the name Temple Terrace Law Group because I had that seed planted
Mm-hmm.
a long time ago. I did a brief search on Sunbiz and looked around to try to make sure it didn't exist because I certainly didn't want to get smacked with a lawsuit the minute I opened. But it was I reached out to a friend who's a classmate and had been where my business partner at the time, Kimberly Pinder, who got married at later and became Kimberly Hunji. She passed the bar when I passed it, but she had a brief period where she was getting everything situated. Then she was admitted at that point, and I knew that she didn't have a job either. So I asked her if she was interested in this idea, and she luckily was. So we've been business partners ever since. That was about 3 years ago. But that's mostly how we started. Just mostly I was I saw this location for a really good rate. It was right across from my mom's building, and that's kind of how I ended up. And then I finally I had to find somebody to work with me so I could get the name, and I reached out to, Kimberly, and that's how we started.
No, I think that's a great story because I think one of the things also, as lawyers, like I said, we sometimes also have to remember, and as business owners of small law firms, we have to remember to do everything, also the marketing and all that. So the fact that marketing, you had the experience, I think is great. You also mentioned when we talked a little bit before doing the podcast, and that you also, one of your focus is family law. So how do you see that? How can you do some planning when you are a business owner that's married? Because we always hope to end up well, but I always tell, an operating agreement is like a prenuptial. So I assume there is some things from the family law side that we can also apply to as business owners.
Yeah, because currently with my current girlfriend, we've of course had discussions about marriage in the future. And of course, the first thing I said, like, well, we'll have to get a prenuptial agreement. It's an early discussion at this time,
Mm-hmm.
but at first she's kind of a little taken aback by it, thinking prenuptial agreement, how offensive to think that we would ever separate them. Like, it's not that we are, but it's just something educated people do where you plan ahead. But no, the legal side of understanding the law helps with almost all aspects of being a business owner. Knowing it starts out where you, as a new attorney operating a law firm, it feels like you're walking on eggshells to not do something unethical, illegal,
Mm-hmm.
immoral. And as a little time passes, it becomes a lot more easy to just sort of go with the flow and be in the routine of not doing anything accidental. I say the one thing that's probably something that's unique about, my law firm versus others is a lot of times when people call I might be the one to answer the phone. And we have a law clerk who's working here 4 days a week, but he leaves a little bit earlier in the day, especially in the evening. If they call me, I might be the one to answer. And I've heard so many people call and say, I can't even get an attorney to talk on the phone to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, you caught me. And what I try to do is whenever they tell me what's going on, they might say something right off the bat, and I realize it's not something I can even help them with. But I always make it a point to just listen to them and let them tell their story. And I kind of realize it's interesting, sort of, that they almost want someone with some authority to listen to their story, even if it's sometimes it's not even a legal case at all, but they just want someone who can tell them, it sounds like a pretty rough situation. We have a little bit of a problem taking a legal position on this, like they might talk about an unruly neighbor or a former partner who just basically is doing really harassing stuff, but it doesn't fall in injunction land or anything. And just basically dealing with rough situations in their life that aren't really even legal. But I always make it a point to like listen to their whole story and try not to say anything until they're done talking, just because I want to hear what they think is important. And that way, whenever I can tell them, I mean, sometimes, of course, we get a case out of these, but there's other times people call and I'll just listen to their story. And at the end of it, I can tell them very gracefully, there's no way I can help you. But then they seem to feel a lot better afterwards. I've even gotten 5-star reviews for my firm by just sitting there and listening to people talking to me on the phone and not interrupting them and not getting like, I guess, basically like taking a stance like, there's no way I can help you. No one will help you, kind of thing.
No, I know. I sometimes joke with friends that I'm a little bit woo-woo because I do tax law. So I help people get in trouble with the IRS. But I think half of the time is that they're just so ashamed of all their problems that they have. So that I end up, a lot of it is just at the beginning, like listening to how they got into that tax problem, how they end up in that mess, and then telling them it's okay. Everybody does it. So everybody tends to have it. So I think it's great that you take time to listen. So I have another question for you. Can you talk about any challenges that you had in your practice and how you overcame that?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest challenge I had is because 2 months after I opened, because I mentioned before, I got my office to be right across from my mom. She had this massive stroke like right after I opened like 2 months later.
Wow.
So I was this time, was still just 31 years old. And basically all of a sudden my mom has this mega stroke, is paralyzed. And I'm like, and then her whole business basically is in limbo now, which she was in the middle of like a teaching cycle. So I had so many different things in my life I had to like deal with all of a sudden, like where I just started this practice 2 months earlier. And then it's almost like all my attention has to go to this, where luckily my sister was able to take over and finish up her teaching cycle. So she didn't have to give people all their money back. But all of a sudden I had to become an expert in Medicare. I had to become an expert in all kinds of things about also planning her estate and things like that were not really what I planned on doing with my time. And it was just so tough because I then quickly had to move home. And then my whole first 2 years operating this firm, I was going home every day after work and taking care of my mom. My phone would be buzzing, people to talk about their legal issue. I'm like, I'm changing a diaper right now. I can't help you like this minute. I know it's weird, but this is like a full-time gig after work where I'm taking care of her. And, I had to for that. She eventually passed away after 2 years. So then, it became a big grievance. So a lot to deal with, but mostly that was probably the biggest obstacle. I feel like only in the last 7 months since she passed away that like I really able to finally just throw myself into my practice and not, have that anymore. It's just so interesting, like being an attorney, whenever you have, these big life obstacles that are going on the outside. And then whenever they're just eliminated, like how weird it is coming back and being able to be flexible and not be juggling all these things. So, my hat's off a lot to any, especially any single parents who have who are in this profession. And like, I mean, if I can really sympathize with what they're going through based on what I went through. It wasn't parenthood; it was other way around. But I mean, it was
but you had to take care of your mother. Yeah, dependent care.
Yeah, and I also had to pop up throughout the night. I had a little baby monitor by my bed, and I was racing over. And, it's really quite experience, having to go through all that having to just launch a firm. So
I'm sure that made you more empathetic to your clients. So now you understand especially your family law clients.
Yeah, for sure. It also definitely worked as a way whenever, when people were like, whenever a lot of people called me. I mean, like at the time, whenever she eventually died, I definitely, for a little while there, people were like, there's a delay in my case. I'm like, my mom just died, leave me alone. And I ended up having to do that a couple times because it was true, but it was just amazing how much that people just got off my back at the second that happened. But, at this point now, we're all basically caught up with everything. But yeah, for sure. The perspective of it was interesting, having gone through that. I could say that I can talk a lot to people about where I'm not even a probate attorney, but people speak to me a lot about, about estate planning, and I can give them a tremendous amount of insight about what to look out for, what to do. And I could say one of the biggest things that is unique about my practice versus others is sometimes there's some areas of law where, if somebody calls another attorney, I can often tell that they've called another attorney who's calling them, confusing them, and giving them a really complicated solution to an easy problem. It's sometimes I get these calls and these people have all of these different ideas of law and ways things have to go. I'm like, you're dealing with a really simple thing here. Like, you don't have to go through all that at all. And a lot of times it's something incredibly simple as the answer to their question. But if you get the wrong person working on a thing, they'll blow up a legal case out of something when there really shouldn't even be one.
Oh, I love it. You're keeping everything simple. I'm a fan of simple things. Well, our last question is that I always like to end with is, can you give some practical legal advice or tip, I should say, to our listeners that about their business and anything in particular that you hear a lot of questions that you may get a lot in your particular practice?
Yeah, well, the best advice that I can give to any business owner is, it might be a little bit esoteric, but it's undercharge and overperform. Basically, you should always break their expectations. And if you promise them the sun, the moon, and the stars, and you can only, you can't deliver all that, and especially if you say that and it's hard to promise that to begin with, they're going to come back disappointed. Now, I have 26 5-star reviews. All of them are real. They're all real clients. I've had attorneys tell me, do you want to trade reviews? I said, no, I don't need your fake review. I have all my ones are real. And it's because I don't overpromise people anything. And that's the biggest way to do is consistently beating their expectations.
And that also keeps you out of litigation.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for listening to our podcast. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you or learn more about your firm, where should we send them to, Byron?
Well, it's TempleTerraceLawGroup.com. And also my phone number here is 813-988-9898. So we're open till 7 p.m. most nights. So we try to catch people after work a lot of the time as well.
And I know we talked about family law. What other practice areas does your firm have?
We handle a lot of matters relating to family law, personal injury, and also some other civil matters and business disputes. That's
perfect.
Basically it.
And I can attest to getting 26 5-star review. That is very impressive. Not many law firms have it. So I can say that is really impressive. Well, once more, thank you, Byron, for joining us in our podcast. And thank you to our listeners for listening to us. Until next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Ask the Tax Attorney podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. And if they're in tax trouble, they will too. Once again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.